better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life.
Hello, Rob. Hello, Matt. Welcome again to the door to adventure.
There are many doors to many adventures.
This is Dungeon Master of None, and once again, we are talking about Planescape.
I will not be going through any of these doors because I believe that when people go through a portal, they are destroyed and replaced by clones. Which makes sense if you think about it.
Is a valid point of view. Depends on your interpretation of the, quantum realm and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. But I think it is, a valid conclusion to come to, which is why I'll be traveling through the closest portal immediately so that I can be destroyed as soon as is humanly possible.
I mean, the great thing is all points of view are valid because this is Planescape where, Planescape, where there are many views about the universe and the multiverse and cosmology, and all of them are valid, and you get to have arguments about what is real.
Infinite possibilities, infinite opinions. That's the world of Sigil and Planescape. If you listened to last week's episode, you know that the Planescape Adventures in the Multiverse 3-book boxed set has been released, and we discussed the adventure that came with that, Turn of Fortune's Wheel, but there's more to the set. There are 2 other books.
Sigil and the Outlands, which is our setting guide to those 2 places, and Morte's Planar Parade, which is the bestiary. Rob, let's start with Sigil and the Outlands, because I believe it's the more interesting one.
By the way, Matt and I have no consistency in how we pronounce Sigil,
and neither should you. And
neither should you. And I will not change. So just say it how you like.
Locals pronounce it Sigil. So in one interpretation, my way is more correct.
I do
but
agree.
All are valid,
with
including Rob's less cool.
My wrong way of saying Sigil. I do agree with Matt though that this is the more interesting of the 2 books, and Sigil in the Outlands has a few things in it. An introduction to Planescape, a chapter on character creation, a chapter on Sigil, and a chapter on the Outlands.
Let's talk about its introduction to Planescape. I thought, okay, if I had to choose, I would take the 2E box set because it's got a really deep read on like all of these concepts about that we know and love about Planescape, the unity of rings, the law of threes, the sort of you're at the center of the multiverse at all times, no matter where you are. How do you deal with a setting where there's gods who can do whatever they want and that kind of stuff? But I didn't hate this one. It certainly gets to the point faster.
Yeah, actually, before we jump into this, let's talk about this a little bit, because as we have discussed Planescape before at length, and that's because there are multiple high-quality, very easy to find books on Sigil and the Planes, and one question that listeners might have, one question that I had that I'm not sure that I have a good answer to is, what does this offer that's not in those older books, right? Does this, and this isn't, there's not necessarily anything wrong with an update for a new edition, even if it's just like, I don't know, a new coat of paint, that's fine. Maybe you shouldn't charge full price for it, but whatever. But I think we should be clear, like, is there anything new? Does this distinguish or update or improve anything about the setting, or is this just a 5e version of the older Planescape adventure books?
Well, let's start with the information for old heads, because there's not a lot of us, and they deserve a treat. I would say that one of the big changes is that some of the ways to get around are sort of sidelined or not important, right? There's no mention of the Great Planar Road or the World Tree Yggdrasil, or some of these the river Styx, these kinds of things. It's pretty much just like, hey, there's portals, or you can use spells. I noticed in the Outlands section and throughout the book, any reference to gods or things that are not like D&D related, like Forgotten Realms deities, are gone. Like, if you remember the old Planescape, there's tons of like Celtic and Greek gods.
Yes. Yeah, this has come up before, but Wizards has pretty much slammed the door shut on there being real-world deities anywhere in the multiverse, which was, was goofy. But that was a part of second edition D&D. It was something that you could reasonably expect to encounter a priest of Odin or something at some point if, your DM wanted you to. So I don't know if I care, but that is a thing.
It's interesting. So like in the Outlands, you won't find like a Celtic deities domain like you used to, but you will still find the Norns, and you will still find the river Ma'at, which are from, Norse and Egyptian mythology. Yeah. So it's like they scrubbed some of it, but not all of it.
Well, sorry, and if you'll forgive a little aside,
yeah, sure.
A lot of there are still sphinxes. There are still, I think there's stats not in this, but for Draugr, like Wizards of the Coast and most fantasy properties are happy to borrow like monsters and creatures and concepts from other mythologies, but I guess now we're drawing the line at the deities themselves. But it's still okay to have Norns, or it's I'm unsure about what I'm unsure about like this decision you're making. I'm unsure about the line that's being drawn. I don't feel super strongly about not having, the Norse pantheon or the Egyptian pantheon available in my D&D games. I'm just like, okay, so but you still have a Gynosphinx. Like what's the deal with that, Wizards?
Yeah, it's unclear, but yes, gone are Asgard or Isgard is still there, but you're not going to find a mention of Mount Olympus or Zeus's realm. So some of the vaguer things are there, but not the specific gods, which again, I could take or leave. I found it funny to have priests of real world religions, because I don't have to explain to the players what that god is about, because most of them are all nerds, and they know what,
right.
Hephaestus's domains and deal is. So we get a very quick introduction, and yeah, I think it's not as deep as the philosophy of the campaign setting as 2E, but it does get to the point quicker, and we are given some player options for 5E here. I believe it's two backgrounds and a couple of feats.
Yeah, there's the Gate Warden and the Planar Philosopher.
Yeah. So, Rob, I was sort of expecting backgrounds for all of our existing faction, a la the factions we got in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. So there you could, instead of just taking planar philosopher, so this is a catch-all one. So, okay, you pick this, and then you go look up what your actual like ideals should be for the various planar philosophies. And I know it takes up a lot of space, but I think we would have been better served to have backgrounds for all of these, because then you could say to your party, okay, we're going to do a really faction-heavy campaign. Everyone picks their faction, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of neat that based on your faction affinity, you get a associated skill. That's kind of neat. And I do love the Planescape factions, but it feels, I don't know, like so many things with the factions, kind of not very well explored. And you can go back to the older books and find out a lot more detail about the Sigil factions, but I would have liked a bit more. Yeah, like the backgrounds related to factions in Ravnica. I think that was a good model, and I would have liked to have seen it.
I already complained a lot about some of the, or one of the feats in specific last episode.
Oh yeah, we should talk about this now.
Warden doesn't really get the point of portals in Planescape. It's not it's honestly, I guess if a player wants to spit a feat on it, it's fine, but it's a way to curtail things that in my mind you would not want curtailed at your table. Ideally, we need to find a portal to X. That means we have to go talk to Y, and that's the fun of Planescape.
Right. I mean, I don't know if this is just like how I run my games, but like, anywhere the players want to go from Sigil, they can go if they find the right person to talk to and they're willing to make the right deal. Like, it might cost them something, but you're literally in the city of doors, right? Somebody has a key and you just need to find that person and figure out what they want. And that's, I hadn't thought about it as much as you had, Matt, when we talked about it, but the more I've thought about it, the more I've come around to your way of seeing things, and the more I dislike it. It feels like it gamifies something that doesn't need to be gamified. Like, if there's a portal, find the person with the key. Don't use your feet to crack it. I don't know.
Right. So I would say there are three themes to Sigil in my book. And I think one of them is emphasized more than the other in
the rule of three.
The rule of threes, that's why I did it, is one, Sigil is the backstage to the multiverse, and there are two that are kind of at odds with each other. Sigil is the city of doors, you can get anywhere, but Sigil is also the cage, and sometimes you can't leave.
Yeah.
And the cage has multiple meanings, we can get into those in a second, but I like that opposition of both cage and door, and I think that works well for play at the table.
In short, Sigil is a land of contradictions, is what Matt is saying.
Thank you for your report on Sigil, Bart. Here's an interesting thought, Rob, that I had. I'm not the first person to have it, right? The cage could have multiple meanings. It's that some people, the players, can't get out. Maybe it's the Lady of Pain's cage. Maybe she can't get out. Or maybe, and again, I'm not the first person to have this idea, a portal can be any like enclosed space, a ring, any sort of ring. What is Sigil? It's a giant ring.
It's a giant ring.
What if the whole city was a portal to somewhere really crazy, or the lock on something really crazy's cage? There's, this idea is just kind of out there because I think it makes for a great overarching theme for a campaign. What is the true nature or a true nature of Sigil?
Yeah, this is one of the cool things about Sigil is that there's often, well, all fantasy writers have this problem, but especially wizards. There's an instinct to explain things that don't need to be explained, to round out all the edges and fill in all the blank spots on the map. But what I've always liked about Planescape and what I've always liked about Sigil is that there's lots of things that are mysterious and unexplained or partially explained, and that's okay. That's a great way for the adventure setting to be. And the cage, like Matt has said, is just like a great part of that.
And in this book, when we're told the basics of Sigil, we get a little bit of that. We get a little bit about the Lady of Pain and a nice table of portals that if you need to come up with one on the fly works pretty well. I didn't find any, the Lady of Pain is so mysterious, and so are her Dabus who speak in rebuses. There wasn't really a lot of lore change there, but these are also great features of the campaign setting. What if you have the most powerful being in the universe, maybe, here, and there's no explanation for why she is the way she is? Fill in. We should mention
that there's some cool art in this book. Is that enough to justify it entirely? No, but there's some neat stuff.
If you get the deluxe edition, you get a nice bit of cover art by Tony D. Terlizzi or something like that. I can't say his name. The original, the original artist. I like the art in this one. It's definitely the original art for the original Planescape book is so iconic and cool, and the vision of one mind. It's hard to top.
Yeah.
So the factions that were given for Sigil are the updated factions post-faction war, which is something that when we talked about Planescape in our first episode on the subject, we didn't really bring up much because... So this is the problem. I mean, I think, Rob, in theory, both of us like the idea of maybe a meta plot, but in practice, it always kind of sucks. And I kind of felt that way about the faction war. I'm like, I feel like you had a better array of factions pre-faction war.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, other systems have, like Shadowrun has an evolving meta plot, which is kind of fun to, well, in the past had been fun to sort of like take part in, but in practice, it can be really hit or miss. But it's different. It's a change.
Here is the summary of the changes post-faction war. If you're just coming to us from our first episode on Planescape, the Believers of the Source, aka the Godsmen, and the Sign of One are a new faction called the Mind's Eye. So the Believers of the Source are the ones that are, like, hey, we are going to become gods ourselves. And I believe the Sign of One are the people who believe that they are the most important person in the universe and that the universe is shaped by their own imagination reality. I think both of these factions on their own are absolutely perfect and bananas and bazonkers and either, depending on your own perspective, very annoying to very cool, which is perfect for a faction. And, when they're merged, they just become less interesting to me. They're explained in the text of this book as people who believe in fully realizing one's own potential and learning through experience. And, I read that description. I'm like, is that really something I can knock my players against?
What does that mean? That's very vague.
Right.
Sounds like the tagline for like a new age cult. I just,
right. People who believe in learning through experience. I mean, isn't that a lot of people? Like, give me the people who believe that me and everyone else are kind of shaped by their own imagination. Right? That's someone who is going to annoy or intrigue your players. Yeah. Or someone who's like, I'm going to become a god. So in conclusion, the faction war sucks. The other changes we have here are the Dustmen are renamed the Heralds of Dust. Some nice gender-neutral language there. The Free League and the Ring Givers are one of my favorite factions, are demoted to minor factions. And the Revolutionary League and the Chaoticetics are gone and have been merged into a new faction called the Hands of Havoc. And I believe this is also another consequence of the faction war, and it also sucks because both of those were kind of interesting. The Revolutionary League, where you're like classic anarchists who want to overthrow the cosmology of reality. And the Hands of Havoc, the new faction, here I'll quote here again, are a collection of radical individualists. united under a banner of change against rigid laws.
Once again, we see Wizards' anti-anarchist bias at work. They just cannot give us an anarchist faction that does not involve like literal Molotov cocktail throwing. They just, can't refuse
not against
to
all
engage.
laws, not against all order, against rigid laws. And this is not fully on this book. I think the faction war was a huge mistake, and it sucked ass, and it made it worse. So it's maybe not the fault of this book. But again, like, you compare the Hands of Havoc to some of the other factions, like the Heralds of Dust. Again, your players meet a Heralds of Dust, and they're like, actually, we're already dead. This is the afterlife. That's super interesting.
Yep.
Someone who's like, again, this is a fine faction for a regular campaign. Oh, there's a group of people united for change against rigid laws. That can work in mini campaigns, but Planescape is so weird. You need factions that are even weirder.
Yeah, you gotta get weird with it. And that's what's cool about Sigil. This has always been cool about it, is you have people organized along these really, like, again, the gods are fake. We're all already dead. The universe is created from our own perception. These are, it's not like we like freedom. We're against rigid laws. I don't know. I gotta agree with Matt here. These do not stand up to the classic factions, which are weird in a cool way.
Yeah, so I miss the old factions. It didn't look like they tried to add anything new, because one of the things about factions is there's always more emerging. So this would have been a great place for the writers to throw in a new faction, but sadly, there aren't any. I still love the ones that are here. Like, you've got your annoying libertarians, the Fated, who are just like, just do whatever you want, take from people. Whatever you have determines your worth. I love those guys. I mean, I don't love them, but I love having them in my campaign. But yeah, there's still some great factions.
Yeah, I mean, many of the classics are there. It's just if you are a fan of the originals, which you might be because they're great, then there are some changes. Though, it would be very easy to ignore those changes if you're already familiar with the old factions and just want to use the detail from the older books.
Yeah, so I guess my only other thing to say on the old factions is that the new descriptions are more concise. They're about half a page per faction. In the old book, we've got about a page per faction plus more information sprinkled throughout. So I feel like if you want to go really deep into the faction and, get some information about important figures in them, the old Planescape guide will serve you a little bit better. But then we turn to the meat of the book, which is the first part of the meat of the book, which is the Gazetteer of Sigil. And it's pretty comparable to the one in the old book. It's about 40 pages, same as the old book. And we also get a nice fold-out map of Sigil. It doesn't really have a lot of detail on streets. It's more of here are the important locations. What do we want to say about the Gazetteer of Sigil?
I like I love a Gazetteer. I'm always delighted by this. I got a lot of, it's good. There's lots of great locations. There's lots of good hooks. There's lots of maps and other visual goodies like Matt's fold out map that he just described. I don't like, I hate to keep coming back to this. because I don't know that it's a problem that other people are going to have, but I have this brain worm where I'm just like, well, is this an improvement over what I already have? And I'm not convinced that it is. I don't know that this. I don't know that I need this to run adventures in Sigil, because I already have lots of great detail on the wards and the people of Sigil from older books. And that is maybe just like a specific Rob criticism because I'm a cheapskate, but I just like that. I didn't have any problem with the Gazetteer, but I also wasn't really like, it didn't grab me because I didn't feel like it was new or interesting. But Matt, you are more familiar with the source material, so maybe you have a better insight on this.
Well, I think it's to say something, unreservedly positive. I think it is really good. I think Wizards has gotten away in a lot of their books from including gazetteers, and from my perspective as a dungeon master, that's usually the most valuable resource a campaign setting can provide. Yeah, and sometimes they haven't put it out in a really long time.
Yeah, actually, I shouldn't complain because they often don't include a gazetteer, and I wish they would, even a short one.
And yeah, and again, unlike some of the other things that have masqueraded as gazetteers, like the paragraphs will detail people there that you can, use. And so it's not empty. It's not just broad strokes. It is good. Rob is right. Is it better than the one in the original Planescape box set? It's again just kind of a step sideways. It's a lot of rehashed of information. I tried to do some scientific study of this, Rob. For example, I compared. Okay, there's one pub that I really like. It's called the Green Gauge. It's a halfling pub, and there's like one paragraph on it in this book, and in the original one there's like a much longer paragraph that I think gives you better information about the people running it. Again, yeah, maybe in the details some of it is a step down, but again, it's still a gazetteer. It still gives you a couple of NPCs for the place.
I guess what I would say is that if this is your first exposure to Sigil, it's a good one, which is not what I would say about some of the other books that we've gotten. If somebody, actually, there's probably a lot of people who are in this exact position, is only familiar with D&D from the past 5-10 years, and they've never looked back at any 2e books, and this is their first encounter with Planescape or Sigil, this is a great introduction. There's a lot of detail here. There's a lot to work with.
My bar is always, is this gazetteer enough to help you run a campaign in that place? And I think it is. So in a sense, there's really there's not as much to say overall about it if it passes that bar. Now on to the nitpicks. So, here's an example, and this is from page 31. My favorite faction, personally, is the Sensates. They're people who believe that the universe can only be experienced through, our physical senses, and that anything else is not important. So they're great for player characters as it's instant motivation to go out and do, anything. One of in their Civic Fest Hall, which is run by the Society of Sensation, the Sensates, they've added a new thing. Let me describe it to you. It's called Sensoriums. The most popular offerings in the Civic Feast Hall are the Sensoriums, semi-private rooms where creatures can record and relive one another's sensory experiences through sensory stones. For the price of 10 gold piece, a client can feel the thrill of a researcher's epiphany, the weight of a widow's grief, or the warm bite of a flaky pastry. Memories and longer, more complex sensations tend to cost more, but the lure of nostalgia draws repeat customers. Now, Rob, do you notice philosophically what the problem is with the sensates running a simulacrum of sensation is?
Well, Matt, that's not experiencing the universe, is it?
It's not.
Yeah, that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the sensates and the sort of philosophical traditions that they are rooted in. Things like hedonism.
Yes.
Which isn't actually what it sounds like. It was a school of... Anyway, sorry. Getting away from this.
Wait, what was it? No, I want to know this because I care a lot about the sensates. What was the actual...
Well, I mean, the hedonists were actually... They were like post-Platonist philosophers, and it wasn't just about like big orgies, because they believed in the...
But that was part of it, right? We still get the orgies?
Because they believed in the importance of like pleasure and feeling and sensation, they were like closer to some of the like more austere philosophical traditions, because they wanted to preserve their enjoyment of that sensation.
I love life and its pleasures as much as anyone here. Except perhaps you, hedonism bot. But we need to be shut off. Especially you, hedonism bot.
I apologize for nothing.
But sorry, coming back, that's reminding me of something that I wanted to gripe about. Sorry, the sensory stones. God, I'm so tired of complaining, but I do want to complain. There is like a magic items section in this book, and I remembered it. I forgot it because there are only 3 things in it. I remembered it because Matt brought up the sensory stones. One of the things is the Mimir, which is the talking robot head, which annoys me, but whatever, which is key to the adventure, which we discussed. There is the portal compass, which points to a portal. And then there's this sensory stone. And I don't know what my like specific complaint is, Matt, but like I feel like they should have had more. I feel like they should have put more magic items in here. I feel like that there's a lot of design room that is not being taken advantage of, and I shouldn't keep accusing the designers of being lazy, but that's what it feels like to me. I'm like, why even bother? Like, I guess, like, the presence of 3, like, bare bones magic items just draws attention to how many magic items are not there. That's, I guess, my complaint about this section.
I mean, if we're getting to a broader critique, as we go through some details, it does seem like everything here is just very lazy. Like, the Gazetteer, like, almost all the entries are, in the original thing. Now, the original thing didn't have art or maps of these places. Like the original box set's pretty bare bones on that. But again, yeah, there's so little new, and then what is new? It's like, 3 magic items, and again, like 2 of them are again essentially the same from 2nd edition.
I have a similar frustration with the section at the end of Chapter 2, Adventures in Sigil, which is it's how to run adventures in Sigil. So picture in your mind what you think a section of a GM book about running adventures would look like. And it probably doesn't look like this. What we have here is literally 1, 2, 3, 4 tables and a couple of sentences. And I'm just like, Matt, when we're working on one of our adventures, or we're working on a campaign setting,
or we're putting off working on one of our adventures.
Yes. Whenever we actually get to do this, the thing I get most excited about is describing how to run adventures, right? How to put your campaigns together, because that's what I'm most excited about. I have to stop myself from like overwhelming the reader with like too much information and too many hooks. And this is just like, roll on some tables. Like, there's just like no detail or instruction on how to string these together, how to make an adventure. Like, you don't want too much, you want to give your GMs like the chance to create their own, but like this just falls flat for me. I would have liked a little bit more, information on just how to make this come together. I was frustrated by how lazy this felt. Yeah, there's 6 faction missions. Like, roll a d6. Here's 6 things the factions might give you. Like, that's not enough. Like like not only is like the chart not big enough, but like that's just like not enough detail. It's not enough information, you know?
Right. The original book and this one too, better, or I would say not better served. I'm not saying get rid of a random table. You can always use a random table.
Yeah, they're not useless, but yeah.
Yeah, 2 pages with like, and we've seen this 1,000 times in every system and setting. That's like, all right, we're going to give you 4 example adventures in Sigil, right? The old book did this, right? Where it's like, all right, here's a 3-paragraph description of an adventure, right? And that is way more to go off of than the characters must infiltrate another faction's headquarters and steal a priceless item, right?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Sure, that could be a fine adventure, but there's no details that would make it interesting. Whereas if you took the time to actually write something, I guess that's our big critique. Is it seems like no one working on this book felt like doing any work. I don't know. I'm sure it took a lot of labor, but
I mean, that's the thing is like, there's a lot here, but like, it doesn't feel like anybody cared about this. I guess like, I try to keep my criticisms constructive. I don't want to like hate again, but like this from the beginning to end really feels like just nobody cared about this book very much. Like were they just like running out of properties and somebody said, well, we need a Planescape book, so get to it, kids? Like, there's no passion for the setting. You know, this is something that, you know, I have complained a lot about other Wizards books, but even the ones I didn't like, I could tell that there was somebody involved who was really excited about it. Many people even were enthusiastic about what they were trying to do. They often fell flat or it wasn't for me, but I don't feel that with this book, with this whole box set.
Okay, yes. It bugs me that the Sensates sell fake experiences.
Sorry, that's a valid complaint, Matt. No. You brought this up.
I know it's so...
No. I think you're totally valid to bring that up because it demonstrates a lack of interest in the setting, and you brought up the Nothics looking at screens in the in the adventure, and those are like small things that if the rest of it were better put together, you could easily overlook. But I again, I don't know. We're getting off track, but like I have watched many things that I care about be ruined in the hands of writers or showrunners who didn't care about it the same way that I did. So a word of advice is just like to let these things go. But it is frustrating because they didn't have to do this, right? Right. Nobody like they could have spent all this time and energy on a different book and just put so much into Planescape, but not seem to like really care about it is just very frustrating.
My other big critique of this book, so the final section is on the Outlands, but it's mostly on the gate towns, which if you heard our adventure thing, just doesn't make a lot of sense because the players are going to half of the gate towns. So you kind of need that information in the adventure and not here, and a lot of it like is repeated information because you have to introduce each gate town. I don't think this is enough. It's enough to run Sigil, but I don't know if it's enough to run Planescape, right? There's not a lot of details on, like we said, the other modes of transportation around the universe, around the blood war between devils and demons, around, I don't know, just come up with a new thing that's going on, right? The room for new conflicts that are spanning the multiverse in Planescape, like Planescape itself, is infinite. And so, like, when I look at what we have, We have a decent gazetteer to Sigil, and we have a decent description of each of the gate towns in the Outlands. And we're given 2 pages about the rest of the Outlands. And then if you want to know about the other planes, right, the outer planes in particular are usually front and center in a Planescape campaign, is you have to go back to the DMG because there isn't any information here. And when you go back to the DMG, you do get 15 pages on the rest of the planes, but for most of them, it's just a paragraph. I think this was a failing of the original Planescape setting, is like, I would have liked more interesting locations in the other planes, like more cities of brass, please. But we didn't get that in this one, and you definitely need the DMG, and you need some more information, because I would not call this the Planescape campaign setting book. I would call it the Sigil, and not the Outlands, Sigil and the Gate Towns book, because for the Dungeon Master, that's what you get.
Yeah, Matt, tell me what you think about this. We have written a short adventure around Sigil. We have run games in Sigil, both of us.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot more experience with it than I do, but like, we both like the setting. I can't say that I care very much about the Gate Towns or about Outlands. Like, I don't see that as like I that information should exist. I think it's important to, but like, if I'm in Sigil, if I'm running a Planescape or a Sigil campaign, I'm probably intending that campaign to be in Sigil or to be like a plane hopping adventure, not an Outlands hopping adventure. Again, maybe this is just me, but I was confused about this in the adventure itself, and I'm confused about the attention that it gets in this book.
The Gate Towns, in my opinion, are important because they're less scary than the outer planes themselves, right? You go to Gehenna and like you immediately start succumbing to despair. That's tough, right, for a party, but you can go to the Gehenna's Gate Town and it's not as bad. But again, they're there as like introductions and starting points, and they shouldn't be the end point. And if this is the only book you have, it is the only end point. I also think one other way this book sort of missed the mark, and I'm curious about your opinion about this, is one of the fundamental parts of Planescape is learning that the world of like a mortal world like Faerun or whatever your homebrew campaign is not important, or it's not the key to anything, and no one gives a shit, which I like, right? And it works great because, remember, we're playing a role-playing game. What is really important is where your PCs are, and your PCs are in the planes now. So that is now the most important thing. And I feel like it missed the mark for explaining, okay, there's all these powerful things, gods, in the outer planes, and they're all working through proxies, which then need the player characters to accomplish things they can't accomplish themselves, and that is the fodder for adventure. And I don't think there was a good explanation in this book for how to do that.
I agree. That's how I think. I mean, that's the cool thing about Sigil, is your players get there, or they are there, and they come to understand that they are insignificant in the grand scheme of things, which is, a huge turning wheel of infinite planes and powerful beings, and everybody's a little pawn on a chessboard. And this is more forgivable, I guess, but I do feel like they missed sort of like the theme and the feel of Sigil, especially in these books.
Yeah, if I wanted to, let's say, write a full adventure for Planescape, instead of having no point to it, right? There are so many great big hooks, right? And there are so many more that you can come up with. Say the Blood War is one. I would say conflict between gods of law or gods of chaos is another interesting one. I would say that the Afterlife, the true meaning of the universe is another fun one. Sigil itself as to what its point is, or maybe uncovering you could do a whole 20 level campaign uncovering a tiny mystery, one answer to the many questions about the Lady of Pain. I just think there are a lot of cool big stories to tell in Planescape, and small stories. I just don't know if this book has the information to help you get started on writing one of those stories. Another minor thing, and this is true for both this book and the monster book, is so this book adds little quotes in the side, which is common D&D practice throughout 5th edition and earlier editions. But they're all from, or almost all of them are from Mimir or from Morte, and I really love having just random people as the speaker of the quotes, because it just gives you an NPC there, right? Here's one from the original book. Pike it, Berk. I'm Thor's proxy, and your laws don't apply to me. Last words of Franok Hedon to a mercy killer, right? And there we immediately have a character that might show up thinking he's hot shit, and we can use it. It also tells us something about the mercy killers and the nature of the universe.
By comparison, here's a little aside from Morte in the beginning of the multiversal menagerie. Anything you think you know about critters the material plane doesn't apply in the Outlands, Chief. Your dog back home ain't nothing like a hound for the Nine Hells or Mount Celestia. The only thing those planar sorts have in common is that neither wants to hear about how you're totally a dog person. Morte.
Yeah.
That sucks. That sucks.
Again,
listen,
the first book does this. It uses the NPCs. Why not use the NPCs throughout it? Give us information. And again, it can be a funny thing, but just having more proper names in a book to fill up the margins is the best use of space.
Now that I have given up on trying to be positive, I know that I've reached the point where, I am cringe, therefore I am free, but these are all pretty cringy. They're not very funny. They're not very interesting. And I wish that they would get some better writers for them or stop doing them, because they feel like they're trying too hard to be witty, and it's not working. It's not funny. Morte is not funny. Was Xanathar funny? I feel like these have gotten worse, to be honest. Like I feel like I didn't hate like Mordenkainen's like little asides as much as I've disliked the recent ones. But
well, Rob, I've got a proposal for you, because we've got like 10 to 15 minutes to kill here. We try and keep our episodes around an hour. But instead of talking about these monsters, which I don't have any strong opinions on, they changed the way the Romani work. They're weird metal guys instead of clay people.
Sorry, I know you mentioned that.
Oh yeah,
was. Well, no. Just one thing. Matt's correct. The original artist and the original art of Planescape is just like, it is a beautiful paean to just like the 80s style of doing shit. There is really good updated art. Like it has a different stylistic sensibility, but there's lots of really cool monster art, and visually it's a very striking book. Again, it doesn't quite look like Planescape to me, but it's good art. The Modrons all have pouty lips, which is it's fine. It's I don't know, whatever. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say is like I there are good artists working for Wizards. But yeah, what do you want to do instead of talking about the monsters? Because there's not really anything here.
Let's just talk about Planescape.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about cool ideas, for Planescape.
Well,
go ahead.
We've touched on this, like, and you already we've already brought up like how we run adventures and like what's missing, but like I really think that like, well, Sigil first, right? Like I think the cool thing about Sigil is that it's like it's a city literally at the center of the multiverse, the center of the planes, and so all the sort of like power and ideology rotates around that, like the nature of planar existence, which is why the factions are so central, which is why questions of like how do the gods exist and what is their true role are so interesting and so compelling. And I think that any adventure that you run that hinges on Sigil that you are missing out if you don't center those factions very heavily. And this was a major point of frustration that I had with these books, is that they mention the factions. Clearly they understand that they are important, but not why they are important.
Right. I think it reminds me that like a fun way to set up a really big Planescape campaign is to take something from the factions that they believe and make it like partially true. Like, you know, the godsmen believe that, yeah, the gods are fake. Well, what about have a conspiracy where actually there's only like 5 gods or something, and all the others are the masks, and the players find this out and they have to either stop everyone else from figuring this out or use it to accomplish some goal. You know, just take something that they believe is true and use it to do a thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's all of these are just like so rich with potential. Like, you know, Matt's favorite, the sensates. You know, you can imagine a particularly fanatical sensate trying to experience more and more dramatic sensations up to the point of, you know, doing gruesome or extreme things, or even worse, like visiting those upon other people in order to show them the glory of their ways. You know, you can imagine a faction of the Aethar trying to kill a god or destroy gods to, you know, prove that they are correct. Like Matt said, you know, taking action on their faction's behalf. I mean, there's so much to work with here. There's lots of other things that are happening in Sigil, but I feel like this should be the center of your campaign, right? Something like this.
Another one, I mean, my one of my other favorite factions, the Heralds of Dust, the people who believe that we're already dead and this is the afterlife, make part of that true. Make it so that there's actually, the players are the only ones who discover, you know, maybe a pre-life or a post afterlife, right? What happens to those souls when they reach nirvana or sink into despair in the lower planes? Maybe they discover the way to to see how the sausage gets made, and souls are created, and they have to do something with this or prevent someone else from doing something with that. Or just like you were saying with the gods, right? It's a minor blip in the outer planes, but it could cause lots of things. There was like some epic war, or a heroes did some things on one planet in the material plane, and now there's 20 new dead gods or something like that. Or a bunch of new demigods show up and they don't know how to behave, right? Because they're former adventurers and they're causing problems.
Right. Well, and you mentioned earlier, Matt, like, you know, there's these minor factions and you can come up with your own if you want to. You know, I think you're right that the faction war was not great, but the premise behind it is a good one, right? Like a great thing for established factions to always be dealing with is upstarts. So if anything you can think of that's not covered by the existing ascendant factions, it would be a great, you know, a cult or an upcoming minor faction that is, you know, causing a ruckus in Sigil, you know, a faction that believes in, you know, the primacy of the flesh. It's a little bit like the Sensates or something like that. But you could come up with anything to challenge the existing order and make that, I mean, that, again, like Matt said, anything, even like a tiny part of like the multiversal order can make a 1 to 20 campaign in Sigil.
Right. Yeah, no, we should both say the faction war is a good idea for your campaign. Yes. For the campaign setting and moving the meta plot. For setting up the faction war is what a campaign saying should do, not actually executing it.
Yeah, never
Rob,
end. Yeah.
I have a really dark idea. All right. So in both this version, not in this version of Sigil, but remember when we were talking about one of the books that we actually really kind of liked, Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, that had all these cool adventures. What if, Rob, a new faction emerges that is the leaders of the Radiant Citadel. And if you'll remember, the Radiant Citadel are kind of like good Christian or social democrats from Europe.
That's right.
Who,
That's right. They have their
who are neoliberal,
perfect neoliberal paradise in a crystal. That's right.
And
that's right.
And they're taking over Sigil, which and you can imagine there are some factions that love this. And others, maybe the Sensates, the Free League, the Revolutionary League, are like very much against it. The consequence will be is that the multiverse stops evolving, right? It stops changing, right? Because that's the perfect neoliberal order, is to finally end history.
The end of history. Yes, the Radiant Citadel has come to Sigil to end history once and for all. Oh God, that's good.
Right. Yeah, just call the faction the Order of Radiance.
Original idea. Do not steal. Matt and I are going to write this. That's a great.
People hate them. Call them enders. Yeah, yes. They're gonna shut things down and preserve them in stasis. And maybe they have some good things. Maybe they are going to clean up the razor vine and have better local zoning laws in Sigil. But right. The consequence,
they're gonna widen the streets in all of the wards and
all of the poor neighborhoods in the lower ward. they're finally going to do some urban renewal.
They're going to build light rail out to all of the gate towns.
Yeah, no, absolutely they are. And maybe they're not evil, just like most of these factions, right? And the great thing about them is some of them are pretty gnarly, but they're not always clearly, evil.
Sure.
Like you can it's great to put in a good dustman. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not even the nihilists aren't evil. In fact, like the bleak cabal is actually like, relatively amenable. They just, have strong beliefs about there's not any meaning in the universe. And the good ones are a little bad and the bad ones are a little good. Again, this is what's great about Sigil. If you want like a classic good guys, bad guys campaign, fight, go slay Tiamat. No, it's not a great setting for that. But if you want a complicated, shades of gray type of campaign, then of course Sigil is perfect for that.
The other like great idea that brings up is just like put in, a party of people who are going to show up and they have the means and the will. They just need to get there to go and slay Tiamat. And, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. The players help them get there and then Tiamat's slain. Consequences. Now there's 10 evil dragon gods.
I mean, this isn't a new idea, but I do think it's funny. It's always fun to think about, like, the order of the universe relies on some nasty things existing. And if your heroes are going around destroying, high level demigods or gods like Tiamat, then they are upending the order and possibly making things worse.
Yeah, it's always fun to put in if you can do this from either side, right? If your players are messing around too much, the inevitables from Mechanus, show up and play multiverse cop on them, or let the players be recruited as, agent. This is a better, like, Wizards, as you said before, really wants the players to be Loki, the TV show. As I understand it from watching the first 10 minutes, there's an organization that does things to protect the multiverse.
I forget what
put
it's
the
called.
Players working for the Modrons and the Inevitables to enforce order on the mortal planes, and then as they get better at it, they have to deal with like proxies of gods in the outer planes.
I mean, that's the thing, is like it's just like it's such a rich setting. I mean, you could do just like an ordinary planar jaunt and just, have adventures in various planes. But I think the most interesting thing is all of the both small scale local faction politics, but also how that plays into the grand turning of the celestial wheel.
Yeah. I think my favorite idea for all of this is one that I got from reading Turn of Fortune's Wheel, right? As Rich Burlew said in Order of the Stick, even the worst cup of coffee reminds you of all the other coffee you've drank before, and can be a source of inspiration and joy. And even the worst adventure can spark creativity. I think, I may start working on this adventure just for my own players. Is okay, they're fated, they're glitched, they can't die, they keep respawning in weird ways, but it's because they are, they possess the divine spark of the god of portals, and now people want to use them, or they could even use themselves to overthrow the Lady of Pain and the city of Sigil itself, and they'll have to decide whether to, eventually work for the lady, protect it, or shake things up crazy style.
I mean, I think that's a lot better of an idea than what we were actually given. That's what I agree with you about. You can get something even from a bad adventure, and I loved the hook. It just immediately didn't go anywhere interesting, but it's a good hook.
The last thing I'll add is what if you wanted to do a dungeon crawl in Planescape? And I thought about this, and I think there's many ways you could go about it. But I think the most interesting dungeon crawl, and there's stuff you can steal from Monty Cook's Dead Gods, but create a dungeon out of a body of a dead god. And there's all sorts of portals other places, and there's all sorts of weird creatures there, and the players have to go back to Sigil to deal with the artifacts they find and the consequences of what they discover there. But yeah, dungeon crawling in the astral plane through the entire mega dungeon is the body of a dead god. That sounds like a great adventure to me.
Yeah. Sorry, listeners, that this was so negative.
It just didn't include the planar slang. I could have forgiven a lot more if they had the planar slang. I don't care if they changed it or updated it. I'm sure there's some things in it that are maybe a little bit appropriative of a Cockney culture or something.
It's pretty
I
out
don't know.
There.
But
I mean, it's clearly it's got.
But you can
it
make it whatever you want
with Cockney speech. But it's not Cockney speech. It's very much its own bizarre thing. And they really piked it, Matt, by not including it.
They absolutely piked it, Rob. Well, I'm glad a couple outsiders and Clueless are introduced to Planescape, and this is this is where we're at with 5th edition. Is occasionally they write something new that is interesting and intriguing, even though we may have critiques of it, like Radiant Citadel. But when they do something old, because they're unwilling to publish a hardbound thing plus 3 other supplements plus 5 adventures for it, there's always so much less than there was before. So if you really want to get into it, you've got to go back to the old stuff, which again, it feels like 5th edition has lost all forward momentum.
Yeah, it feels like, speaking of the end of history, I also I know, Matt, that you like Planescape, and so do I, and I like Spelljammer, but the originals are not perfect. They have a lot of problems, and they deserve a solid update. And when we talk about how much we liked the old ones better, it's not because they're exceptionally good. It's just they were interesting, right? That's my thing about a lot of the old stuff is, in fact, a lot of it was quite bad, but they weren't afraid to get weird and have new ideas. And that's my main frustration with recent Wizards publications is just it's all played very safe or lazy or both. And I just I don't know, let people be creative, do something new, or let your writers take risks with the material. And that's
again, I think
my frustration here.
We've said this 100 times before on the show, but as much as I love old campaign settings like Dark Sun and Planescape and Spelljammer, I would, those books are always there, and people are innovating on them and coming up with new fan-made stuff for them, and that's fine. Wizards is the one with all the resources and writers and art teams and layout teams to make impressive stuff. Make something new,
Yeah.
Make a new campaign setting. I dare you.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, how long has it been? It's, wow us. Give us a new campaign setting.
And I'm not, we can't count Tal'Dorei or things because they didn't come up with that and they didn't write it.
Yeah.
They're publishing it now, but they didn't make that, but they could. It seems like, Rob, like with this Planescape one, they really wanted to make a Loki multiverse, multiple copies, like time, wimbledy wobbledy, like campaign setting. To me, Rob, that sounds great. I don't know if I'll play it, but I'm certainly interested in it. If you came up with one of those from scratch, that would be amazing. And then you wouldn't have to try and half shoehorn in things that sometimes work and sometimes don't to Planescape. You've got a complete blank space, blank slate. You're not spending 90% of your pages rehashing things that have come before.
Yeah, I agree with you. There were lots of problems with this, but I think the core problem is that they tried to shoehorn, again, modern, I'm just going to say Marvel-style multiverse stuff into Sigil, and they just ended up doing both badly, which is not what you want. That's not ideal.
And I know you feel the multiverse idea is played out, and I completely agree with you. But if people are into Marvel-style storytelling, give us a campaign setting that has time travel and multiverses, and where heroes are player characters, like the D&D classes, are superheroes. If people like that, write us that world, because that sounds pretty. That could be interesting. I would read it.
Yeah, I personally think it's played out, but also if it's done well, and it hasn't been done well that way in D&D yet, give us that setting. Give us something new rather than trying to staple it on to an existing framework, which again, Planescape and Sigil have a very strong theme and identity of their own, which doesn't really fit with that type of game.
So yeah, everyone's working on the new editions. This seems, really on autopilot and didn't have too many eyes on it. Like we said, we liked the DM screen.
We'll just leave you with that, everybody. If you've got questions, thoughts, if you're angry at us, write us at dmofnone@gmail.com. You can add us on Twitter at dmofnone. Check us out on our Patreon, patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None. Link in the show notes. Join us on Discord. We love you. Thanks for listening. And whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.